I know the audience was so excited. They were wondering if they were going to get any work today or not. Welcome into another episode of the Young Dad Podcast. I'm your host, Jay. Super excited to be with you. It's kind of a very last minute episode, but we were talking and I had my arranged person for this morning not show up or communicate. So it could have been my fault. I didn't reach out to double confirm for yesterday, but the email program I use sends out those reminders. So I'm not sure what happened, but it is what it is. We're here now. One door closes and another one opens. So Kurt, super excited to have you. Before we jump in, I do just want to call out my listeners, call out the audience today that's listening. Down in the description of this episode, no matter where you're getting it, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Pocket Cast, YouTube Music, Amazon, Audible, wherever you're getting your podcast today. I'm everywhere. Go down to the link. Very first top of it is going to ask you guys to subscribe to the email newsletter. That's going to give you guys early access on weekends to that Monday show that's dropping. It'll give you podcast updates. If I'm going to be a podcast guest or anything else pertinent to the show coming up, tips and tricks, dad advice, dad hacks, mental health advice, all the things that we really promote on the Young Dad Podcast will all be within that newsletter. So please go and subscribe. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. I'm not charging you anything for that. I never have. I never will charge you guys for absolutely anything that we do here on the show. Unless it's your choice to support the podcast monetarily. So without further ado, Kurt, welcome. Super excited to have you on the show. A little bit about you. I know just a tiny little bit. You host the Two Geeks Talking podcast. And you've been podcasting since 2008. You have over 1,200 episodes of interviews and conversation, which I absolutely love. You're fun. You're engaging. You're great on social media. You're quick to respond. You're all over it. And yeah, your 1,200 interviews are introspective and educational one-on-one interviews with indie and professional creators in comics, TV, film, music, and video game industries, primarily on YouTube. It streams on WDJY 99.1 FM in Atlanta.
Sorry, right? That's a contract currently, but whenever this airs or whenever someone listens back to it, it may not be there again, but the YouTube channel is always updated, just a heads up. So it's youtube.com/TGT Media. And the podcast is just by searching Two Geeks Talking, it's TWO, on Podbean, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts.
All the places. So tell us a little bit about you, how you got into the podcast industry, how it all started for you, and how you got to where you are now.
Well, it's a popular story that you always hear whenever you hear the phrase, hey, we should start a podcast. That always seems to be like a common phrase people say these days. And back in 2008, it was the exact same thing for me. I was literally helping a friend create a webcomics database on webcomics.com at the time. And I said, we have all these amazing guests, over 4,000 webcomic guests back in 2008. And that's the height of webcomics. We should interview these people. And he's like, go ahead, I'm too busy. So without any knowledge of podcasting, without any knowledge of how to get guests on the show, without any knowledge of even how to create a good website, or even create a podcast landing page, things like that. I started fresh from the very beginning of 2000. Fast forward 15 years, 1,200 plus interviews later, we've transitioned to video interviews and podcasts. We've had amazing guests from Phil Folio to actors and actresses like Jason Mewes to a variety of others, Jessica Negri, a bunch of, just a ton of people. I can't even list all of them, or else we'd be here for more than our time. Long story short, what started as a passion has turned into a business, has turned into a fun time having one-on-one creative interviews, and sometimes more than one person as guests on the show. And everyone has a story to tell, and it's up to me to help bring that out. And I'm glad that, people can come on the show and have a great platform to talk about their passion for what they do.
I love that. And that's, a lot of how we started too. My brother and I, when we first originally started the podcast, probably told this story, I don't know how many times at this point, but we played video games and he said the word that never go back, and never stop hearing in your head is, oh, we should make this into a podcast. And it's really turned into something so beyond my dreams of where we started it. You know, we just started with like little silly bits and no clue what we were doing and all the things back in the summer of 2022. So we were still like well into the COVID-19 pandemic when every other person was starting a podcast because, why not? I was just barely more than a year removed from my divorce. I think I was only a few months from it being fully finalized at the time. So like life was chaotic to say the least. And it was crazy. So it was how it started. And I think about just hearing myself talk now, and I hear myself talk and have these conversations with all these people and just how different like I am just as a person in general. And like I'm sure you feel the same. Like when I go just out in public and just have conversations with random people, like I don't hesitate hardly at all. Most people today are so hesitant to have a conversation about anything, let alone religion, politics, gender, anything like that. People don't want to touch those with a 10-foot pole, which should be the opposite. The more we touch those topics, the more common they are, the less taboo they are, and the easier they are to have those conversations. But, you know, it's so much easier for me to have a conversation and to literally message someone for, well, we messaged for maybe an hour, if that tops today, between initial engagement on threads to where we are now to like recording. Like it's been about an hour. Like
Roughly,
I don't think I've ever would have done that when I first started the podcast and been like, oh, you know what? Hey, we're talking right now. Are you busy? I'm not busy. Let's just do a podcast kind of thing. So it's
Well, I think that.
Oh, you're good.
I agree with you. Yeah, when I first started the show, I was more of a co-host. I wasn't even an actual like outgoing person that you see here on screen or through your earbuds today. For me, and I still kind of am, but I'm an introverted extrovert. So to put that into terminology, it's like it took me 61 episodes for me to start finding my voice. It took me 3 years after that to get comfortable with myself and talking with people to the point that I wanted to actively engage in a conversation rather than just simply ask questions. And I think you're right. Like going down the street, people don't communicate. Their heads are down, they're looking at their phones, and they're not paying attention to the surroundings around you. And you never know what missed conversations you could have. I mean, don't stalk the people, mind you, but like at least have a good engagement with the people as you're actively talking with them. And so you find your voice how you find your voice. And I'm sure doing this show, like you said, you finally are getting engaged with the people. And like I said, you wouldn't do something like a quick, hey, do you have 30 minutes to do an interview? Like that's how I got a lot of my shows early on, was to take that chance to step out of your own comfort zone and say, you're an interesting person. If you have time, let's have a great conversation. Let's get you on the platform so you can talk about what you're passionate about. And if you do that, don't worry about the lights that are shining on you, or don't worry about the record button. Make sure it's recording, but make sure that you're engaged with your conversation and having fun. Like, because if you're not having fun, then why are you doing this?
100%. 100%. And like, I've never had like a fancy setup. I've never had amazing, like top quality, amazing studio quality audio because I mean, I have a microphone from Target, a webcam from Target, a laptop I've had for years from Best Buy, and a second monitor that I run everything else out of. But like, it works. It's very much how I started was very much just the Gary V method. Was just record it, post it. Who cares if it's great? The right people will gravitate towards you because of what you're saying, not because of the quality of how it's coming into them. Yes, quality matters. I don't buy into that agenda too much. So it's like, I need to have a fancy background. I mean, look, I'm in a bedroom with an Eagle sign, a Michael Scott poster, and baseball hats, and my door open behind me. Like, I don't care enough about all those extra things. Like, I'm not to that point where I need to have something so fancy, like a whole studio. Like, this is good enough. Like, it works so well. It's worked for 100+ episodes. Like, we're good. And I've had fun and enjoyed it. And I know it makes a difference because of the messages that I get throughout time. I've literally had people message me that said your podcast has saved my life. Quite literally, it has saved lives. It has saved
Yeah.
men from going off the deep end. It has saved individuals from going off the deep end. It has brought new
Mhm.
awareness to mental health for men and women and fathers and parents that they didn't think was needed. It's helped open conversations around, child loss during pregnancy. It's helped open
Yeah.
conversations about race and stigma and just open my eyes to so many things. Like I talked to a Reiki master, I don't know how many episodes ago. Like I'm Christian, I'm religious, like that's so far off from where I am, like just as an individual. But hey, it's a conversation,
Yeah.
it's an interesting time. And so many people, like even other podcast hosts, are so caught off guard when I talk to them, and they're like, "Oh, so what kind of questions should I prepare for, and what kind of things do you normally ask?" And I'm like,
Mhm.
Whatever kind of comes up, and that scares people. It scares other podcast
No.
hosts. Like maybe not you, but there's other podcast hosts that it has turned away from like collaborating with them because they're afraid to have a unstructured kind of free flowing conversation that they're not in control of.
Yeah, well, I think, and hey, going back a bit, the Gary V method is how I do all my stuff as well too. I'm a little more tightly edited. Like when I first started, the first 4 years, I had 2 to 4 hour interviews that I just posted raw. Like there was no editing whatsoever. Whatever happened, and away we went. Hiccups, people calling in, people crank calling, whatever. It was just literally, here you go, have at it. It was fun. But the unstructured interview, the unstructured questions, the conversational aspect of interviews is perfectly fine, because you never know in a conversation, even if you have questions written down, and this has happened to me before as well, where I'll have, say, 10 or 15 questions, but something will spark in a conversation where it'll be like, I don't need to ask this next question. I'm going to go off on a different tangent. And that's just flexibility and being able to converse with people. And while the questions are a great structure, you don't necessarily have to do this all the time. You can just simply, like you said, pop up an interview and away we go. And as for a technological setup, yeah, I've upgraded over time, but I only have a green screen behind me because I have a mess behind me as well too. I just don't care about showing that just yet because I'm reorganizing. I've upgraded equipment over the years, and I've done a couple of different lights now as well too, but it's only because I just wanted a different level of production value, just because I've done what I've done and I just want to get to the next level. Whatever you use is what you use, and if it works for you, then all the best. Like my webcam is still from 2008. Like it still works. Like I'm not going to
Works great.
stop using something without, unless it absolutely breaks and I have no other alternative. But
Mm.
the conversations that we have with people, and yeah, I interviewed a Buddhist. I've interviewed more recently a Buddhist, Bushi, who did a documentary filmmaker who did a documentary art of Buddhist sculpture and showcasing that, and that was a 12-year period of his life. And then I've also interviewed a person that works in Hollywood who's also a Buddhist monk. So I've done those avenues, and the conversations that we get to have with these people, we're only on this world for a limited amount of time. You want to spend this time with the people around you as much as you can, obviously from a family perspective, but the friends we meet along the way are really the fun that we get to have in our lives.
100%. And that's what it is really, like the conversations, the social media aspect of it for me. Like I've really kicked off and liked threads over the month of February. Like I've grown my audience from around 100 followers to 600 followers in less than a month,
Nice.
which is mind blowing because it took me a year and a half to get 500 followers on Instagram. It's taken me a year plus to get 120 subscribers on YouTube. To get to
Mhm.
these, I mean, numbers are arbitrary regardless, because I have more views on some videos than I do followers. I have more
Yeah.
engagement on a reel or a post than I will followers or something like that. So numbers are all over the place. It's
Mhm.
arbitrary, it's hot words, buzzword, SEO, all that technical talk kind of stuff. That stuff it's never mattered to me. It's never mattered to me. It should matter more than it does, but really I say that because it's like you said, it's about the friends you make along the way. It's about the conversations you get to have and the enjoyment that you have with talking to others. Like when you get to meet a random dude on Threads and you record an hour later, kind of thing. A perfect example.
Yeah.
Or when
Yeah.
you get to, work with someone or talk to someone, it's like, oh, I've also worked with this person. Oh, I've talked to that person. And it's like, okay, well, if you talk to them, I talk to them, we probably have something in common here or there. Um, and it's so fun. And I don't mind the numbers being low or the low engagement or posting something or all the things. Cause like, it's not, it's for me to show that I can do this. If I really, really wanted to and commit to it, I could do this hardcore. I don't want to though, because this is fun. This is my creative outlet. This is what I do
Yeah.
for enjoyment away from the rest of my life. It's kind of like my escape from reality, to where I get to vent and to talk and to have conversation, to meet new people and to socialize and to, work on like my improv skills, because like a lot of what I do is kind of just off the cuff and just off the dome. And I work in mental health and I'm a mental health clinician. And so it's really important for me to be able to have like really good listening skills, really good conversation skills, being able to not clap back, but be able to give a high level response to anything I'm asked, really, and be able to think on my feet and to think on my toes and to be able to pull knowledge out of the deepest, darkest crevices of my brain at any given time, and
Yeah.
also to be able to relate to people, to be empathetic, to be understanding, to advocate when advocacy needs to happen, and all these things. So it opens up a whole new world. It's opened up a whole new world for me. I don't think I would be half the professional I am in my field if I haven't been podcasting for this long and introducing myself to new people and expanding my mind, expanding my perspective of life, kind of thing. Because I don't know what it's like to go through a pregnancy loss, but I have 3, 4 episodes of people who do, that I have talked to, that I can say, hey, if you're experiencing this, go listen to these episodes on my show. This person
Yeah.
understands you. Go listen to their show. This is a resource for you, kind of thing. So it's really cool to be able to do that overall.
Yeah, and it's amazing how you say you talk to a person if you're in this business long enough when it comes to at least a show or a podcast. You get to that 5-year mark, you get to that 10-year mark, 15-year mark, 20-year mark, and you look back at what you've done. And I've only recently started to recount my episodes, only because I basically stopped at, I've done over 1,000, because I had done over 1,000. I just don't know how many years ago that was, to be perfectly honest with you. I've lost count. But if you go back to your past interviews and say it's been 13 years since you've talked to a guest, what's stopping you from reaching out to that person again to bring them back? I had 2 interviews, one last year, one or two last year, where I had not talked to these guests in 13 years. And they are big names in the comic industry. They worked for Magic the Gathering when Magic the Gathering first started. One of them did, at least. Another's been in webcomics and podcasting for over 20 years as well. And so, you get these connections because you had a good conversation with them. Maybe you stick out in their mind because you asked a great question, or maybe you stuck out in their mind because you asked a question they hadn't been asked before, and it just got them to think. That's why I love doing Two Geeks Talking, is because of the introspective nature of a lot of my questions. And the introspective nature of the questions only came about 8 years into the show, because I started doing a documentary called Little Person Amongst Media Giants. And that was 4 questions I was going to ask Stan Lee. That didn't happen. So what's my best alternative? Instead of scrapping a documentary I put 10 years of my life into, interview guests and ask them these same questions. There's my concept. And eventually I'll put it together and release it. But it gets people to think. And the off-the-wall questions and the off-the-wall connections that you get, whether you're talking about entertainment or whether you're talking about mental health, will get people to pause. And I think a lot of times people have in their minds preconceived answers to questions that they already think that they're going to be asked. And throw them a curveball and see what they can do. And 99% of the time, they'll come up with something they didn't think.
Exactly. And that's like my favorite part, honestly, is like in my questionnaire, I don't know if you got to see it, but it's very broad. It really makes you, I try to engage like thought-provoking questions. Let me pull that up here, because I've never actually really talked about what's in that questionnaire, but It really
Okay.
aligned with that, where it's not going to be like typical. It's not like give me a. It's very open ended. I love open ended questions,
Yeah.
but I don't directly ask those questions during my recordings with people. I don't even call them interviews because they don't feel like interviews. An interview is me like grilling you with question after question after question kind of thing. It's not like that. I ask about their platform, kind of what they're about, just get a little blurb about who they are to help me introduce them.
Mhm.
Classic kind of long time running joke: does pineapple go on pizza?
Oh God, no.
Um,
Even though I'm Canadian, no, it does not.
no, it doesn't. Correct. So you pass. Uh, when did you become a dad or a parent? Very obvious one there, pretty close ended. And then what does that mean to you? Being a dad, parent, man mean to you? Because I've talked to some young men, I've talked to some older men, and everyone in between who don't have kids. Maybe they're not a father. So like, what does just being like a man or a person like mean to you really? And then like, I try to leave things up to interpretation. I want it
Mhm.
to be interpreted because my psychological background likes to work in these questions a little bit. They're very open here. What is a hot button? So you have to interpret, okay, hot button, however you interpret that, or a sensitive parenting issue you're passionate about changing. So it really invokes that thought. It's like, well, what would I want to change? Like if I could change something, or what do am I trying to change, or like what's my goal here? What's my mission? And then tell me about a mental, emotional, behavioral health issue you're familiar with and or passionate about. So again, that mental health dynamic, which is so important, and a lot of men come on the podcast, so it forces them to go into that uncomfortable space to talk about, parenting issues and what they're passionate about, and then that mental health aspect, because those are three things that men normally don't talk about, is stuff they're passionate about because it usually gets shut down, mental
Right.
health, and just something they want to change because of course we feel like no one listens, feel like no one cares. Like if I talk about my passion, who cares? If I talk about my mental health, who cares? If there's something
Right.
I want to change, who cares? No one's gonna listen. It's like I'm listening. I have an audience that's listening to you right now. Like you are
Mhm.
being validated within the space. And let's use this space to help validate others who are feeling the same way you are. Because if you're feeling this way and you're in these thoughts and you're in these patterns, I guarantee there's 100 other people out there who are too. If not 1,000, maybe even 10x that and 10x that, 10x that. There's probably millions of men who think the same way across the world that you could be helping by having this conversation.
But it also, I mean, taking it a step further, I think the question, are you happy, is an interesting one as well, too, from a mental health perspective, especially for men specifically. I got asked that recently. It was the only question more recently on other shows I've been on that made me stop and think, because, what is happiness to us, and what is our state at that time of answering that question? And I think when it comes to the mental health aspect, yeah, you're right. A lot of times we as men don't, we bottle everything up, we push everything down, and we go about our lives because that's what's expected of us. And when we start talking about feelings, when we start talking about our mental state, a lot of people, men and women, will either tune out or just go about their day. And so, it's difficult to have a good conversation. I'm glad that at least there's a platform here for that to happen. But I think, if there was more open communication instead of just simply these are the standards of how we live our lives, we're never going to change that, then you're going to get a lot more issues that are going to lead down a very dark path very quickly. And so open communication, no matter what gender you're speaking of or to, will is beneficial. And I think we all need that, at least even for 5 minutes a day.
100%. And it's so important. And, the more we don't talk about it, the worse it gets. At least in the US, there's a 4-to-1 suicide rate of men to women. Like it's astronomical in some other countries that are first world, second world countries in Europe, in the Baltics, that are hundreds of people, hundreds of men to one woman. South Korea being, I think, toward the top of the list. Last time I checked, this was a couple years ago, but South Korea was like a few hundred men to one woman that have a successful suicide. Like, this is a worldwide, like, issue. Not taking anything away from the women and women's mental health. I don't want to do that at all.
Right.
But you look at the scope of it, y'all are a little bit more taken care of. Y'all have a little bit easier access, a little bit easier time, support, overall accessibility to mental health services, and support for your overall mental health and well-being. Because that matters more in society's eye, at least in the Western Hemisphere and North America in general. For men, it doesn't matter as much. It's that 4-to-1 number is like, okay, so what? But then you dial that in and you zoom in a little bit, right? And you start to see the ages. Men 40 to 60. Zoom in a little bit more. Caucasian men, even higher. Or you zoom out a little bit and you zoom into another part of the age spectrum. Teenagers, adolescents, youth who identify as LGBTQ+, all in here. All dying by suicide. Suicide and having successful suicide is because, at least I believe in my research and my knowledge, is because of a mental health issue. Is because of you couldn't take it anymore. Is because you wanted to die because you couldn't live a life anymore. That's a happy, fun, fulfilling life. And it's easier to end it because that's where your mind's at. That was just the easier way out. It doesn't always relate to gender identity because you look at that spectrum of the top two populations, they are polar opposites. White men in their 40s and 50s, LGBTQ+ youth who are, teenagers, adolescents. There's something beyond that. There's something deeper. There's mental health issues. There's crisis going on around us that we're just turning our blind eye to because we're too busy looking down all the time. We're too busy looking down all the time and not having these conversations, not having these outlets, not listening to podcasts or professionals or seeking help, or even our countries having open accessibility to the help. But because we're not talking about it, because we're not trying to push for the change and the reform at a national level to really push for this, call our local leaders, call our local officials, and, say, hey, like, our area is underprivileged for mental health services. We need more because we have youth passing away. We have youth doing this. We have men in our community dying at a rapid rate. It takes local people, it takes doctors and people in the hospitals, it takes people to make these changes and to push these narratives, because who's going to know it best? It's going to be nurses and doctors who are seeing it day in and day out, and for them saying this, we've got to say something, we've got to do something, and standing up for that preventative aspect of medicine. I've talked to several doctors, I've talked to some nurse practitioners who are very much about the preventative aspect of it, but that's not what pays the bills. That's not what keeps the lights on in the hospital. That's not what keeps their rates absurdly high. That's not what keeps insurance companies in business and the medical bills and the collection agencies flowing. It's not what does that. It's the reactive. Why prevent when you can just react and then, everything else? My sister-in-law, she's an emergency room nurse. I talk to her about it all the time, and not all the time when I see her, we don't talk that much. But I ask her about it. I'm like, what are some of the things you see a lot? She's like, we see a lot of teenagers who are trying to end their lives. It lines up here at the local level, and it's sad because it's like their hands are tied, because if they start to say something or they advocate for the change, they're going to lose their job. They're going to be blacklisted in the industry. And they can't risk that because that's their livelihood. That's how they feed their families. A doctor doesn't want to risk losing his or her medical license because they believe in preventative medicine and they believe in treating the mental health crisis and they want to advocate. They can't do it because they don't want to lose their status. They don't want to lose their practice. They don't want to lose their licensure. They don't want to lose what they worked for 12 years of their lives for, kind of thing. And so it's such a twisted thing, and it's sad to myself as a mental health professional. In my program, we have over 100 kids in the program I work for, but the biggest barrier in our program is that you have to have state insurance. If you don't have state insurance, you can't access the services, which is really sad because not everyone on state necessarily needs it, and there's very strict restrictions, like how much you're making as an individual to be able to get on
Right.
state insurance or to be able to get your kids on state insurance. So it's all twisted. It's all messed up. It's all intertwined in a very ugly and very unsettling and uncomfortable way. And sorry to go off on a very deep tangent there.
No,
So,
no, no. I see. I unfortunately I can't add anything really to the conversation. I mean, being Canadian and all, I'm sure we definitely have our own situations and stipulations on this side of the border as well. So I think it would be an interesting avenue to look into, at least on this side, to see the difference between what our healthcare actually is providing, what services we have available here, versus the actual resolution to, say, people that are either thinking about suicide or unfortunately have dealt with suicide, and the families that are also connected with those unfortunate incidents. It's one of those things where, we all are, like I said, we all are here for a limited amount of time. I mean, if something is available or something can be, if something can help someone avoid that end result, then I think, hopefully there's methods and advocation on different avenues, local, provincial, statewide, federal, etc., to be pushed forward, because these people are going to be the next leaders, the next future of this society or these societies, and they could be a genius in some way, shape, or form. They just didn't have the support when they needed it.
100%. I guess I get so fired up about it, and it means so much to me. It's because I lost a friend in high school to a suicide a few years ago, and then on top of that, I lost my younger brother to an overdose about three going on 4 years ago at this point. And so it hits really close to home for me, having dealt
Yeah.
with my own mental health issues, my own mental health struggles, seeing my dad struggle with his. There's a lot of meaning behind it just personally for me. So that's a lot of why I get so fired up about it and passionate about it, and because it's so important, because I don't want anyone else to lose. I don't want anyone else to lose their younger brother. I don't want anyone else to lose a friend. I don't want anyone else to lose whatever role that person fills in your life. Because it sucks. Because you always carry a sense of, I don't know, like guilt or shame, or you carry the shoulda, woulda, couldas. You carry the
You carry the loss, is what it is.
you
You're
carry the
carrying the grief
loss.
and the loss of that person.
Yeah, and that just doesn't go away. And it's okay to always hold on to that. It's okay to always have that. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. To hold on to that memory, to hold on to that love you had for that person, to hold on to what that person meant to you and means to you ongoing, and into the different stages of your life throughout. But it's a tough pill to swallow, knowing that it wasn't a natural cause. It wasn't done by someone else, and that it was self-inflicted for reasons we'll never know. Reasons that we'll never understand 100%. Because at least, with an accidental, like a death that, happens naturally, why. You get the closure. At least if there was someone killed someone else for whatever reason, at least you know why. And there's closure. With a suicide, there's never closure. You never get to know, like, why, unless they leave something behind that says why. Even then, that even sparks more questions and more, like, everything. I mean, a lot of people have seen 13 Reasons Why, and
Mhm.
like, that sparked even more questions. That sparked so many rabbit holes from just that one note that was meant to bring the closure. It sparked even more. So you never understand, because you can't talk to someone that successfully ended their life. And it's just really unfortunate, but that's why it's so important to talk about. To have my platform, that it's okay to talk about these hard subjects. Like, it's okay to talk about hard topics. It's okay to talk about religion. It's okay to talk about gender. It's okay to talk about suicide. It's okay to talk about your story or your experience with abuse, your experience with your divorce. As long as you're speaking firsthand about your experience, there's nothing wrong with that, because your experience probably also happened to someone else in 90% similar way, and maybe you have the blueprint for that next person who is struggling with it. I mean, that's a lot of how the show got started for myself, and where it came from was I was listening to my friend Craig. He, at the time, was hosting a podcast called Single Dad Reboot that I fell across. And it was a very small show, but I binge listened to it, and I listened to it, and it just resonated with me. It made sense. It helped me through that time where I was struggling with processing my divorce and everything going on and transitioning to this new stage. And it got me through. I reached out to him, and he's been on this podcast 2, maybe 3 times now. And he's just a great friend overall, great mentor, a great person that I look to and look up to and admire. And, he had the blueprint for me so that I could lay the blueprint for someone else with this show, and who knows what aspect. So he's a big reason why the show keeps going. And, maybe I was his one person, maybe I was one of his many people that it resonated with. But I know now I have so many people that this show has resonated with and made a difference with, that, have now a blueprint, have a conversation, have a community, have people they can connect with or talk to, or maybe they get involved with one of the many coaches I've had on the podcast. Maybe they go down one of these paths and connect with someone in my communities, or, we become friends and I invite them to the Discord, and then they have an even bigger community of people to talk to and whatnot. And it just grows, and it's like the ripple effect. The podcast is just me throwing the stone, and then that ripple the stone hits the water when listener starts to listen, and it just ripples from there and goes on from there. So that's it. It can be massively impactful, but that's why we talk about what we talk about. So
Yeah. No, I think it's a good platform to have, and it's a different style than what I do. Like, while I do interviews of an entertainment nature, it's still a one-on-one conversation. That format is still prevalent in every single podcast out there, whether it's a person that's just talking to a screen doing a review of something, or whether they're actually interviewing something. And I think the connections that we make, like, I've had some guests that have been on the show 8-9 times over their 15-year career. That's not bad for one every 2 years or so. But it's about, how do you find, besides what they're talking about, how do you find a different way to ask similar questions or different questions that you haven't asked in previous interviews? It's like, what connections have you had with the first time you spoke to someone, then their third time that they've spoke to them? How have they improved as a person? What knowledge or information can they bring to the platform itself? And if it's something new and different, then great. Maybe it's a technological advancement. Maybe it's medical, if that's the case from a mental health perspective. Maybe it's something else, a service that just cropped up after you guys spoke, 3 or 4 years ago. Now it's something different to reach and touch on and get their experience, if they have experience on it. It's the same thing for what we're doing at Two Geeks Talking as well. It's what exactly are we talking about today? How have you changed as a person? How have you improved as a person? And, are there anything else that you've done to help yourself, whether it's maybe reading a book, maybe you've seen a documentary that kind of sparked an interest. Maybe there is some media that you consumed, or a person you spoke to in passing that just got you on a completely different tangent that's helping yourself in your career, or life for that matter. And so, if that's possible, if that's something that we touch on, then great. That's something that someone else may want to know about but never really heard about. And like you said, maybe there's a connection because you're in a similar sphere or a similar circle, and it's going to help someone else. And it's great to see. It's a great connection to have, and getting them back on the show a fourth, fifth time. I have a multiple 5-timers club on the show, so I have to update that list. It's been a while. Other than that, it's one of those things where, if they take the time out of their lives to spend a little time with you, that's even better. That's just a great time had by all.
100%. And I feel it's an honor when someone wants to come back and they're open to coming back, or they're open to cross collaboration, and they invite me onto their show. Like, I don't force it. I leave that door wide open. It's like, when you're ready, if you want to at all, no pressure. They know. It's like, reach out, let me know. If not, cool. I'm not going to be hurt if you don't want to. I'm not going to be upset if you don't want to. Like, it's okay. Like, it's fine. But when I do get to have a repeat guest, I think I've had maybe 5 repeat guests at this point. And it's just crazy. It's like, I have repeat guests, It's like, I haven't talked to you for 6+ months, almost a year now at this point. Like, last time we interviewed was in 2022. Now it's 2024. Holy crap. What did you do over the last year? Kind of thing. Like, we vaguely kept in touch. Maybe we follow each other, keep up on each other lightly, kind of thing. But it's like, what's going on? What's new? What have you learned? What have you grown? All those things that you mentioned. Like, what's up? Like, catch me up on your life, bro. Like, what's up? It's such a totally different conversation. It's just like catching up with like an old friend. It's like, your very best friend that you have from your childhood. You guys may not talk for years, but when you do talk, it's just like that conversation just picks up right where it left off. And then maybe it doesn't go for a couple more years, and then boom, picks right up where it left off. Like there was never any time missed whatsoever. Or maybe it's a family member you have that connection with or whatever. But it's so cool, like, in that spirit. It's like, wow, it's like we just finished recording yesterday and we're recording again today, kind of thing. Like, it's so cool. Just to see that and to feel that connection. And it's an honor really to have repeat guests, to talk to people again that want to come back, that are open to coming back, that are down for it, kind of thing, or that even reach out to me and ask, hey, when can we do it again? I was thinking about you the other day, like, when can we do it again? It's like, I will make exceptions for those people.
But, I've been recording this entire time. I'm saying if you want the audio or whatever, I can send it to you. Do you want me to wrap up? Okay. Well, I was just going to say, I'll just wrap it up, just keep it tight here for you. You can find first off, Jay, thank you so much for being an amazing host. This is a great time had by all, and I learned a lot actually in our conversation. So I can't wait to dive more into your podcast archive there. So I'm looking forward to listening to those amazing episodes you've had in the past. But you can find Two Geeks Talking on our website, tgtmedia.com or twogeekstalking.com. That's TWO. Website's going through a revamp and a complete rebuild, to be perfectly honest. Go to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/TGT Media. The podcast is back at twogeekstalking.podbean.com, or just search Two Geeks Talking wherever you get your podcasts. And as I say every week, everyone has a story to tell. It's up to me to help bring that out. Thanks for listening and watching on this amazing show right here that I'm on currently. Nice. Do you have an outro or something you play? Because you can play that and I still hear it. Okay. Well, I'll throw this together. I'll put it into a WeTransfer and I'll send it to you. We'll exchange emails. Awesome. Well, I hope you have a good, quick day of work. Awesome. All right. Later. Thanks so much.